Let's continue with modal verbs of obligation, prohibition, and advice. Have to. Obligations, things that it's obligatory or necessary to do. Examples: 1. A student has to be on time in class. 2. Students have to be on time in class. That's obligatory, necessary to do. Okay, so here I put two examples so that you check the difference. The first one is third person. That's why you have to use has to. And in the second one, students, I'm talking about they. That's why I'm using have to. That's different. You have to be careful when you use third person. Must. Obligations. A student must respect the school rules. Students must respect the school rules. When you use must, no problem if it is third person or, in this case, they. The modal verb, is the same. And this is an obligation to respect the rules. No? Must respect the school rules. Don't have to. Say that something is not obligatory or necessary. It's optional. In IPN, a student doesn't have to wear uniform. In IPN, students don't have to wear uniform. In this one, it's the same, no? But in negative, you have to use doesn't for third person, and for the others, don't. Why not it has to? Remember, because the auxiliary verb has the letter S. Doesn't. Number 3. In some private schools, students must wear uniform. For them, this is an obligation. Mustn't. Prohibitions, things that you can't do. 1. A student mustn't drink beer in class. Come on, teacher, why not? Because this is not permitted. 2. Students mustn't drink beer in class. Okay? Prohibitions. You can't do. Mustn't. Should and shouldn't. Recommendations, to give advice, to talk about things that it's important to do or not to do. A student should pay attention to understand the class. If you want to understand the class, you should pay attention. That is a recommendation. Students shouldn't be distracted to understand the class. If the students want to understand the class, they shouldn't be distracted. This is a recommendation. This is an advice. Okay. After the modal verbs, you have to use base form verb. No? After have to, has to in third person, don't have to, doesn't have to in third person, must, mustn't, should, shouldn't. The form of the verb is base form verb. No? Some teachers use, for example, bare infinitive or infinitive. I prefer to use base form verb. Okay, let's check some examples from the reading. Obligation. It's obligatory, necessary to do. You have to prepare people both physically and mentally. You have to make them feel confident. Have to. You must check all the equipment very carefully. That is obligation, must. Mustn't. Prohibition. You mustn't be afraid of heights. Prohibition. Another one, prohibition. I mustn't tell them who I really am. Obligation. It is obligatory, necessary to do. I have to do paperwork, answer questions about the service. You have to say bad things about somebody who may lose their job because of your report. This is a recommendation, advice. I suppose shop assistants should always treat their customers well. Another recommendation or advice, we shouldn't be on the streets because we're dangerous. Obligatory or necessary. Sorry, it is not. It is not obligatory or necessary. It is optional. You don't have to have any qualifications. Negative. And in this example, you have the modal don't have to and the verb have. One is the modal, the other one is the action. Obligation, it is obligatory, necessary to do, but you have to be fit and strong. You have to wait a very long time before finding a customer. And here is another obligation, you must be patient too. Okay, let's continue with the book, page 86. Look at the sentences. Which sentence or sentences expresses obligation? Well, BE, no obligation. The letter A, prohibition. The letter D, advice or recommendation. Letter C and F. This is a question. What type of word comes after must, mustn't, should, shouldn't, have to, don't have to? After the modals? Well, base form verb, or as I mentioned before, sometimes they say it is infinitive or bare infinitive, but I prefer base form verb. No? Let's continue with the next activity. In this activity, you have to choose between two modals or choose both, both of them. First one, you learn to play an instrument if you want to be a professional musician. Sorry, it is must or have to. Well, I suppose it's both. Yes, because it's obligatory. It's an obligation. 2. Builders work in an office. Mustn't, don't have to, or both. This one, I suppose, is don't have to. It is optional. It is not necessary or obligatory. Doctors tell secrets about their patients' health. Mustn't, don't have to, or both. This one, I suppose, it's a prohibition. Mustn't tell secrets. 4. Do you wear a uniform in your job? Must, have to, or both. This one, I suppose, is have to. It's a question. Do you have to wear a uniform in your job? Is it necessary to wear a uniform in your job? 5. People who work in banks do a lot of paperwork. Must, have to, or both. The number 5, I suppose, it's both, no? It's obligatory or it's an obligation. Do a lot of paperwork. A firefighter working a team has to, have to, or both. In this one, it can't be both. A firefighter is third person, so the correct one is has to. 7. An architect be fit to do his or her job. Mustn't, doesn't have to, or both. This one, I suppose, is doesn't have to, because it is not necessary, it is not obligatory, it's optional. An architect doesn't have to be fit to do his or her job. My sister must deals, or both. What is the correct form of the verb with the public in her job? Remember, after modals, the verb is in base form, so the correct one is deal. Okay. Finally, this activity, exercise 5, page 87. You have to rewrite Rewrite each sentence using a modal verb of obligation, prohibition, or advice. It is not necessary to have experience to do the job. It is not necessary, so you don't have to have modal and the action, experience to do the job. 2. It is obligatory for builders to wear hard hats here. Builders, obligatory, so you have to use must. Must wear hard hats here. 3. It is a good idea for Frank to work in the summer. It is a good idea. Good idea or a recommendation. Should. Frank should work in the summer. In our school, teachers are not allowed to wear jeans. It is not permitted. That is a prohibition. In our school, teachers mustn't wear jeans. 5. It isn't a good idea to wear very informal clothes for a job interview. Isn't a good idea. A recommendation in negative. You shouldn't wear very informal clothes for a job interview. 6. It is not obligatory for our receptionists to speak French. It is not obligatory. So, it's optional, no? It is not necessary. Our receptionists don't have to speak French. It is essential for Karen to be calm in her job. It is essential, obligatory, necessary. Karen is the third person. She has to be calm in her job. So, students, this is for all. This is all for today. So, with these activities, you can do the homework. It is going to be in Google Classroom. So, have a nice week. See you next time. Bye.